What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the fourth episode of the F.R.E.E podcast, Finance, Real Estate, Entrepreneurship. If you're new here, that's what we talk about, and there is actually a fee. We don't charge anything. We're just asking if you go tell a friend, a family member, subscribe below, something to kind of support the channel. So what are we talking about today, Andrew?
Well, we're just going to be talking about general career tips, finding a job, things that you can do in interviews and applications, even in resumes and extracurriculars and in the classroom, and things that you can do to position yourself in the best way so that you can achieve the sort of career that you're looking for that you'll be able to do once you graduate.
Right. And this is kind of coming from the corporate finance side and then the real estate side for you. So you're getting kind of both sides here of what each industry is looking for.
Right, exactly. So, uh, just before we go on, I just want to go ahead and ask you, what are you going to be doing, and how did you end up choosing where your career is going to go here in the next couple of years?
Yeah, so I actually recently accepted a job as a rotational financial analyst. Technically, it's a corporate financial analyst at a Fortune 500 company. And basically, it's a 3-year kind of gig. 1 year, I'll be in one location doing financial planning and analysis. Another year, it'll be in corporate audit, and another year, it'll be some type of assistant controller role, plant operational role, something like that. But I kind of got this job because it was it was really weird because I came off an internship and I was like, I better start looking since finance recruiting season is so early. I mean, I accepted the job back in September. I don't start till June. So the recruiting season is nuts. But I think I did about 4 interviews for that. Four? I think that sounds about right. An initial phone screen, an interview with kind of 2 people, and then another interview with the audit manager, and then a wrap-up interview with like a vice president. So it was very intensive, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of where I got to it right now, and hopefully for the next 3 years I enjoy myself, and I like the company. I align with the values, and I'm really kind of happy I landed on them.
Yeah, definitely. Is there any aspect of that job that you're most excited for?
Yeah, so I think the traveling. I've always wanted to travel, and it's even better when you're getting paid to do it at a job. I think my second rotation actually takes me abroad, in Italy, Netherlands, places like that for like probably like a week or two assignments. So I am extremely excited about that. And I know I'll be on assignment and for work and stuff, but it'll just be neat to kind of get that international exposure.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So, were there things that you ran into in those interviews that you wish that you had done better?
Um, I'll tell you the things that actually worked for me. So the things that worked for me was the more conversational you can make an interview, the better it's probably going. Is kind of the hypothesis that I've kind of come to. If you can keep the recruiter, the hiring manager, some other kind of co-worker or future coworker or worker, whoever you're interviewing with, if you can keep them just talking about family, friends, sports, food, if it's conversational, it's a very good sign it's
Yeah.
going well because it shows you can hold a conversation naturally. It shows that, you're someone that they would like to sit next to 40 hours a week for, the next 3 years. They feel comfortable doing that. You're approachable. And I think it's just subtle stuff like that that people kind of overlook. It's like, yeah, you can answer these behavioral and conceptual questions, spot on, but if you can't hold a conversation for more than 5 minutes, it's pretty tough.
Yeah, exactly. I always said so. I was sort of advising some friends of mine and on interview skills, and I said the least amount that you talk about the actual job, the better. So if you go into that interview and you can, so say I accepted a job for a very high paid, very high respected internship that I worked for a little while in college. When I was in that interview, we talked about the job for maybe 30 seconds. At the very end of the interview, we had to cram in the behavioral questions with like one sentence each, because the entire rest of the time we were talking about like their hobbies and my hobbies and how it's crazy that we haven't crossed paths yet and things like that. And so, sort of gaining them as a friend before gaining them as a boss, even is definitely really crucial. And I think that the more you talk about other things, the better, because that means that you're friends with them, like you said. So, um, do you have an example? Like, do you remember specifically what you talked about or how you went into that interview and then found something to connect with them? Do you have any sort of strategy around that, or is it natural for you?
Yeah, so over the past 3 years, I've probably undergone, man, 30, 40 interviews. I mean, it's been nuts. Maybe 50 actually. And I really like getting feedback from the recruiters, especially when, there's a career fair or something going on, and you interview with them, and then afterwards you ask questions or you email them afterwards and they give you feedback. And the feedback that I was given by one of the hiring managers was the fact that you just asked me how my day was going and we started off like the interview like that. You didn't awkwardly just walk into my office, sit down, not say a peep until I started behavioral questions. That was huge because it's that conversational, that personal kind of conversation that you want to be having instead of just awkwardly, just silently kind of strolling into their office, just sitting there waiting for them to ask the questions when you could literally, all you have to say is, hey, how's your day been? Has it been interesting? Crazy stuff going over the weekend. I mean, start it with something. Don't just walk past the receptionist desk. Don't just walk past all these offices and not say a word whenever you're being brought back. And I think one of the examples that I kind of used, or I was actually asked in conversational topic, was what do I think about artificial intelligence in the role or whatever, or kind of in the industry, and or just personally. And it was really interesting because I was actually talking about that like not 3 hours earlier with a friend or something. But it's just stuff like that. Because if you start off conversational, they're going to want to keep it conversational because I don't even think they like to do the whole interview formatting. They don't like to
No.
ask all the, conceptual, behavioral, analytical questions. The more you can get them to talk about their kids, their wife, their favorite sports team, it's just going to turn out better for you.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
obviously this won't stay the same for like an entry level position compared to a C-suite person. Now,
Right.
obviously, the C-suite person is going to be having a pretty intensive interview thing because they can't waste time trying to hire someone like that. But if you're entry level, if you're a recent college graduate, or maybe a year or two out, or even for internships, keep it as conversational as possible.
Yeah, definitely. And you touch on something there that I think was important and should be talked about a little bit more, and that is when you said don't just walk by the receptionist. The receptionist is usually friends with people that work there. And so if you just brush off the receptionist or you're not friendly with them, not even maybe overly friendly from what you would normally be, so go out of your way to really talk to them and make sure that you learn something about them. Um, because it may come down to they say, well, how does this person treat people outside of the workforce? And they can just go ask that receptionist, or that receptionist can put in a good word and say, hey, this guy or girl seems really, really nice, and I had a great time talking to him. And for me, in the interview process, something that was really interesting to me, and it was advice that I got a very long time ago, and I don't remember who told me, but in order to sound interesting, you have to sound interested. So if you're interested in that boss, if you're interested in that hiring manager, then you are going to be interesting to them. So learn about them if you can do that beforehand. Or in my personal experience, what I've done is as soon as I walk into that office, if it's their office and not just a neutral like board meeting room, if you walk into that office, look around at what they have in that office first thing while you're sort of just talking to them and walking to the chair. So I saw a golf poster, and we ended up talking about Tiger Woods. Um, I saw some like magazines for cars. We ended up talking about cars, things like that, where you can connect with them, and that's just really invaluable. And I think that maybe that played a big role into your success as well, and landing a job that's really highly coveted. and
Oh
that
yeah.
really sets you apart, especially when you're going for a job that's so highly coveted that such a small percent of people get. There may have been 100 interviews for you, and you got it. So you're the
Right,
most
right.
memorable.
Yeah, and you brought up a really good point, kind of learning about the interviewer before you go in, or kind of, while you're in there. So there isn't an interview out there who has kids who doesn't want to talk about them. If you see a picture of them with their kids or something like that, just bring it up. They
Yep.
will talk on end for days about it. And it's also it's a great thing to utilize the resources you have before you even walk into the office. LinkedIn, oh my gosh, I cannot stress this enough. If you get the name of your interviewer before you interview with them, which 90%, 95% of the time you will, do a quick 10-minute search on LinkedIn about them. Where did they work before? Do you have any common interests? Do they have any certifications? Where do they live? I mean,
Where did they go to
anything that
school?
you can. Where did they go to school? What extracurriculars were they in? Were they in the same club, a same fraternity, a same sorority? Like anything that you can connect with them, it's gonna keep it as conversational as possible, and they're gonna connect with you on a person before they connect with you like as an employee, and that's what you want.
Right. It's much easier to hire a friend. So if I had to hire a
Oh
friend or
yeah.
a stranger, I would hire a friend every time. So just from that position. And one of the interviewers that I had for the job that I was working um, before I got into real estate was the interviewer had one of the same professors that I currently had during that interview. And so we ended up talking about that professor for almost the entire interview. So that was really interesting, and sort of just I found that out just by asking her about what her major was and how she took her career path once she got into the company. So you're going into a Fortune 500 company, so there's multiple sectors. There's probably there's probably 20 different sectors within the finance branch, and it was at least that way with the company I was at. And sort of asking their journey once they got into the company, how they ended up finding where they could add the most value. That was sort of a question that I asked that was really valuable. And another question, or another often overlooked part of the interview, is when they say, "Well, do you have any questions for me?"
Yeah.
That's a
That's
Yeah, they're laying that up for you to be interesting. And so try to make them step off their feet a little bit, because what I asked that I got positive feedback, as I said, what are people not doing? What are people missing coming into this role that you see normally that you wish people did? And they were like, well, we want to see people that communicate better. We want to see people that are more willing to ask questions and things like that. And so if you can differentiate yourself in a good way like that, then you have such a leg up, and you'll pretty much just be an easy hire.
Oh yeah, I mean you brought up a huge point was just questions. I mean, there is 10 minutes, 15 minutes set aside always at the end of an interview where they go, "Do you have any questions for me about the company or anything like that?" And we can talk about the things not to do. Let's talk about the things not to do when they ask that question. So number 1, don't say nothing.
Right.
Ask something, even if you know everything about the company, which I'm sure you don't because you're interviewing there. So even if you knew everything about the company, everything about the person you're interviewing with, ask something. Whether it's about the company culture, whether it's about something else, you just have to ask something. That's like the bare minimum. Number 2 is don't say what everyone else says. And this is kind of what I've been helping with, with kind of freshmen that I work with, or even my girlfriend, or even friends that are trying to set up for interviews. This is what I say. If you were going to ask a question, you write down 2 questions, but you spend as much time as you can on those questions and you make it unique. Because everyone asks, the same stuff, what does success look like in a role here? It's all the same stuff basically. If you can tie in bits and pieces of the company that you researched beforehand and then tie that into a question, that is huge. And that's actually probably what landed me my job. Was I asked a question about, so we were in COVID times, and we're still in COVID times, but basically they're an auto manufacturer, kind of electrification and auto parts. So I asked COVID has taken a hit on kind of, inventory. Did you have any issues with cash flow, being overstocked with inventory? Did that negatively affect your balance sheet? What kind of went on there, and how did you kind of navigate your way through COVID? Because not as many people are buying things during COVID because of the crisis. So they were left with all this inventory on hand, millions of dollars, probably billions of dollars. like,
Yeah, for sure.
and that's what I asked. And I literally got this answer back. Wow, that's a good question. Let me think about it for a second. It's like, if you can ask something company or industry specific, just spend 20 minutes thinking of a question and then another 10 minutes thinking of another. Like, that's all you have to do, because it will make you stand out so much from the regular stuff that they hear from the other 50 candidates that are interviewing.
Yep, they hear, nope, no questions for me. They hear, when will I hear back? They hear those questions. You don't need to say those. If you um, say that in a follow-up email to them. You don't need to say that to them in person. You need to be saying things that are as interesting as possible the entire time. So, I mean, just that one question like you asked, I mean, that can get you a whole job and that can shape your entire career. So, um, just put some time in, have some ideas of things you want to ask, research industry, like you said, and just go into it and be yourself, but be the most interesting version of yourself. Don't be in a shell, shy. Just be a person like they're your friend.
Right, right. And this is so if you are going to ask, what's kind of the timeline or something, you can ask that, just don't count it as one of your questions.
Right, exactly,
Like,
exactly.
ask it as like a last minute thing. Don't count it as one of your questions. Like, you
Yeah,
can ask that, and it's honestly probably pretty good of you to ask, what's the timeline? When should I expect to hear back or something like that? And they usually tell you that even before you ask.
right.
But don't count it as a question.
Yeah, don't use that as a response to the question that they'll give you saying, "Well, do you have any questions for me?" Don't follow up with, "Well, when will I hear back?" Cuz that honestly just sounds like you're trying to game the interview, which is sort of like things that we're talking about, but we don't want them to know that we've sort of like gamed the way that it runs and use these tips and tricks. So you want to seem as genuine as possible, and so that should be like an afterthought, like on your way out even. So, and it does
Right,
show that
right.
you're organized and that you care about the position, and you, so it is good to ask, but it's not a good response question.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you kind of brought up a good point. Is try not to be shy, and this can be very hard for a lot of those introverted people. And I actually was an introvert coming into college. Like, I was not as talkative as I am right now, which is really hard to believe. I know, but it is a skill. It is absolutely a skill, and the only way you're gonna get better is putting yourself in those uncomfortable positions before you get into that interview. And you're gonna make mistakes. Make as many mistakes conversing with people as possible. I don't care how embarrassing it is. I've embarrassed myself numerous counts. I can't even count how many times at career fairs, seminars, networking events. It doesn't matter. They just want to see you talk. just
Yep.
just have a conversation with them. It doesn't matter what you go up and say. You can go up and make a joke and they'll laugh at you. At least a conversation has started.
Yep.
Just get
Exactly.
comfortable in those uncomfortable situations, and that's the best way to kind of pre-prepare for an interview, your recruiting season. Go to these networking events and just practice. Just walk up to someone and try and strike up a conversation. See how long you can hold it. Learn
Yep.
something about them, and then take notes of what you could be doing better.
Yeah, this is a super extreme example, and I'm not saying this as advice or anything. I'm just saying as like a story, like as a funny story, because I thought it was funny. Um, I was listening to this person who's very successful in real estate, um, who currently works on my team, and this person is bringing in probably $750,000 a year. They're very successful in their own right. And I asked, how did you get so confident? Because I'm not. How did you get so confident on the phone in the beginning? And they said that they would just dial random numbers and try to talk with that person for at least 2 minutes. Try to keep that person on the phone for 2 minutes. And if you can do that, then you'll get really comfortable really fast. So I don't recommend doing that. I didn't do that,
Yeah.
but I mean, it just goes to show that practice makes perfect, and so you will make mistakes, and the beauty in making those mistakes is you'll learn how to recover from them, and then recovering from those mistakes is even better than not making a mistake, and that's something that recruiters like to see as well, and how you can think when you've been thrown off, because you'll certainly be thrown off in your first time on the job, and how you can respond to that and sort of recoup yourself.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, just taking it all in, and then just put yourself in those uncomfortable situations, basically, and that's really the only way you can do it, because you can read all the conversation books you want, you can read all the how to talk to people, books that you want, but knowledge is useless without action. If you're not actually practicing it and you're not learning from those mistakes, because if everyone read a book and was perfect at what they did right after reading it with no practice whatsoever, my gosh, we'd live in a utopia. But
Yep.
that doesn't that
Yeah.
doesn't happen. You just have to practice, practice, practice. I've been there. I've been an introvert. It has taken years of practice to get to the level where I'm at now, and I'm still not even that good.
I mean, it takes a lifetime of practice, and so you just start as early as you can, and then you'll be ahead of everybody else who's waiting. So it's not that hard of a thing to actually go do. It's just a mental barrier that you have to get through. So you just have to push through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're gonna wrap it up right there, guys. Hope you all enjoyed the conversation we had. Hopefully you took away something interesting, whether
Yeah.
it's some of our embarrassing stories, good stories, and some type of career building knowledge that you can kind of put into action next time you're applying for a job or in an interview.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you guys for listening. Be sure to check out all of our other social medias. We're at the Free Podcast, pretty much everywhere. So check us out. Go ahead and follow, subscribe, listen to us, follow our podcast, and we thank you all, and we'll see you all next time.
Yep. Have a good one, everyone.